Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Barakahak Wadash, Barakatum. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai. Double honors to the apostles and elders, a great millstone who rule and teach well. In peace and salutations to you sincere Akim out there, pushing this word in truth and sincerity to the four corners of the globe. May you brothers endure until the end. This is the brother Ra'aya with another video, and I'm going to start it off in Matthew chapter 24, verse 12. And this is one of the prophecies that would be taking place in the last days, which we're currently living in the last seconds of these last days, the last seconds of the rulership of the heathen nations, chiefly of the biblical Edomites or so-called white people, before the ushering in of the kingdom of heaven under the true children of Israel, who are known as the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans today, beginning with the elect of the nation of Israel, led by Yahushai Hamashiach, whom the world ignorantly refers to as so-called Jesus Christ. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. And when we go into that word iniquity in the Strongs, it's G458, anamia. And it reads in the outline of biblical usage, the condition of without law, because ignorant of it, because of violating it, contempt and violation of law, iniquity, wickedness. And this is ultimately talking about the world being in a condition of without the laws, statutes, and commandments of Yahweh Bahasham Yahweh Shai in the scriptures, having a contempt for it and violating it. But it can also be talking about the laws of these different heathen governments out here with people just ignoring them, violating them, and committing crimes out here without repercussions, which we're seeing a lot of take place in the United States of America. What did we see happen back in 2020 in the aftermath of the George Floyd protests? Calls for defunding the police, which a lot of police stations were defunded, and then a lot of regulations and expectations were put on police, on the force, and a lot of them left because they didn't want to deal with it. And a major one was the mandatory juice for the C-19. So that's left a lot of police forces all across the country understaffed and undermanned, which is what led to a lot of people out here committing crimes. Over in California, people are going buck wild. In New York, people are going buck wild. And down here in New Orleans, people are going buck wild. The brothers and myself have an app called Newsbreak, which allows you to look up local news. And damn near every night, there's a shooting and a killing, carjackings. There's even a lot of grapes taking place. And since we're living in the last seconds of these last days, it's only going to get worse out here. It's only going to get more lawless and more violent, as it said, because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. And a lot of people out here in America are starting to see that very fact and getting worried, which is what I'll be going into with this article from thecentersquare.com titled, Crime is a Major Concern for Americans in 2023, and because iniquity, the condition of without law, being ignorant of it, having contempt for it, violating it, shall abound. Crime is a growing concern for Americans. Oh, we can't forget Detroit. Can't forget Detroit. Can't forget Chicago. Pretty much all across the country, it's turning into a war zone, a free-for-all, dog eat dog. Crime is a growing concern for Americans as the new year begins, according to newly released polling data. Gallup released the poll that shows that 72% of surveyed Americans predict crime rates will increase, not decrease this year. And that's exactly the case. Iniquity is going to continue to abound, and the love of many is going to continue to wax cold. And it's only going to be exacerbated as inflation turns into hyperinflation. We go into a economic depression, which is going to lead to a collapse, food shortages, job losses, etc., etc. That figure comes after an earlier poll showed a record high. 56% of Americans said crime is higher where they live than it was a year ago. And shootings and killings are so bad down here in New Orleans that a couple of weeks ago they celebrated the fact that for one day there was no shootings or killings. Madness. The 56% of U.S. adults who report an increase in crime where they live marks a 5 percentage point uptick since last year and is the highest by 2 points in Gallup's trend dating back to 1972, the group reported in October. Public perceptions of an increase in crime at the national level have also edged up since last year, as 78% say there is now more crime in the U.S. This is tied with the 2020 measure. The record high was 89% in 1992 when crime rates soared in the U.S. But with the times to come, it's going to make 1992's crime rates and pretty much any crime rate in the past look like a day on Sesame Street. Hey, it's not going to get any better than it is now because we're living in the last seconds of these last days, the great judgments of Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai on you people for all the wickedness you've been committing on this planet. Hey, the president isn't going to save you. The government isn't going to save you. The mayor, the cops, anybody. The only protection anybody's going to have out here, and really it's only going to be for the elect of the nation of Israel, is Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai. Hey, if you're not an Israelite of that elect number, hey, you're going to be asked out here. This is Ecclesiastes in the Bible, chapter 3. I'm going to start at verse 1. And the title reads, A Time for Everything. To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under the heaven. A time to be born, and a time to die. A time to plant, and a time to pluck up that which is planted. A time to kill, and a time to heal. A time to break down, and a time to build up. And with soaring crime rates all across the country, do you think it's a time to heal or a time to kill? A time to weep and a time to laugh. Hey, people out here are weeping due to rising prices on goods everywhere due to inflation, a job insecurity, the coming food shortages, etc., etc. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. And in the United States of America, there's never been any other time in the history of this country that people have been more divided on every level. Race, gender, sexual preference, religion, political affiliations, the list goes on and on. A time to get and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to cast away, a time to rend and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time of love and a time of hate, a time of war and a time of peace. And do you think we're in a time of peace or a time of war when you've got Russia threatening to use nukes, a war looming between China and Taiwan, a war already taking place between Russia and Ukraine, really Russia and NATO, a war brewing between the state of Israel and Iran, and World War III. Notably, FBI crime data this year was incomplete since several major police departments failed to report their numbers. And what could be a reason for that? Lack of manpower. Anecdotally, though, several major cities have seen violent crime soar. Overall, violent crime has seen an increase since the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis in 2020 and the ensuing riots and defund the police movement. The homicide rate in particular has soared, rising about 30% in 2020 alone. A time to heal or what? A time to kill. Crime concerns played a significant role in the midterm elections. Pew Research polling released in late October showed that 6 in 10 registered voters, 61%, say violent crime is very important when making their decision about who to vote for in this year's congressional elections. And with all these votes and people getting voted into office taking place, can you honestly say the situation has gotten better or gotten worse? A situation of law and order being brought, or a situation of iniquity or lawlessness abounding? Notably, Gallup reported in November that 55% of surveyed Americans support the death penalty for murderers. It's so clearly not a time of loving and healing and understanding of each other. These people want to see results because they're getting fucked up out here. Carjackings, robberies, murders, rapes, shootings, you name it. Regardless of crime's eventual impact on voting, we have clearly seen some significant upticks over the past year or so in the public's concerns about crime. Personal worry about crime increased to its highest level since 2016 in Gallup polling earlier this year. Gallup's Frank Newport said, Americans' satisfaction with the nation's policies to reduce or control crime was lower than satisfaction with almost any other issue in a list included in Gallup polling conducted in January of this year. And down here in New Orleans with our Mayor Cantrell, you've currently got a movement taking place called Recall Cantrell to get her out of the position of being the mayor, because crime is increasing down here and people are seeing that her policies have little effect or are just in a state of complete failure. New Orleans is might as well just be considered Gotham City out here. The police have lost control of the city, and it's going to be the very same for the rest of the country, and it's only going to get worse from here on out as situations on all levels continue to deteriorate. People are going to kill each other like animals on the streets of America very, very soon. Blood will flow through the streets of this whore, Babylon the Great. But let's get back to these precepts. This is 2nd Esdras, chapter 15 in the Apocrypha. I'm going to start at verse 14. Woe to the world, or destruction to the world and them that dwell therein, for the sword in their destruction draweth nigh, and one people shall stand up and fight against another, and swords in their hands. And this one people standing up and fighting against another can go into many things. Criminals fighting against law-abiding citizens, one race of people fighting against another, because there will be racial skirmishes in this country, one political class of people fighting against another, because there will be a second civil war in the country, the average everyday American going against those in the government, etc., and swords in their hands. And the modern day sword, especially in the U.S., is the gun, which in the aftermath of those George Floyd protests back in 2022, you saw record numbers of new gun owners in the U.S. I remember back then that places were running out of 9mm ammunition and other common ammunition out there. Those guns and those bullets will be used. For there shall be sedition among men. And the definition for that word sedition is conduct or speech inciting rebellion against a ruling authority or monarch. And what did we just read in that last paragraph? Americans' satisfaction with the nation's policies by those in the government to reduce or control crime was lower than satisfaction with almost any other issue in the list included in Gallup polling conducted in January of this year. People are complaining about how their different government officials are handling the crime issue and other issues out here. I just gave an example with Recall Cantrell down here, and it's eventually going to get to the point where people are going to be coming after their government officials and laying hands on them, putting them to death. For there shall be sedition among men, and invading one another. They shall not regard their kings nor princes, your modern day kings and princes being those in the government. mayors, senators, governors, presidents, prime ministers, as well as the authorities that uphold the system, such as the police or the military. And when there's food shortages out here, hyperinflation, economic collapse, and people's bellies are touching their backs and they're watching their loved ones starve to death, you think they're going to care what the mayor or the president or the governor has to say on TV? No, they're going to get it how they live. They're going to get it how they live, and that getting's going to be extremely violent. Hey, the love of many shall wax cold, and the course of their actions shall stand in their power. Every man's going to do what they see as right in their eyes in these days. A man shall desire to go into a city and shall not be able, a state of martial law, which can easily be enacted with a state of anarchy and chaos out here. What do the elites have that saying? Ordo ab chao, order out of chaos. Hey, these elites really want a state of chaos on the streets of America so they can be further justified in locking it down and get you people to follow after their dictates. For because of their pride, and as it says in 2 Esdras 8 verse 50, many great miseries shall be done to them in the latter days that dwell on the earth, because they have walked in great pride. These great judgments are coming because of the pride and arrogancy that you people, especially in the United States of America, walk in. For because of their pride, the city shall be troubled, the houses shall be destroyed, and men shall be afraid. Houses being destroyed by them getting broken into, getting destroyed during riots, getting destroyed during a state of civil unrest or martial law, with troops breaking in and shooting into them, with people shooting out of them, etc., etc. And men shall be afraid. A man shall have no pity upon his neighbor, but shall destroy their houses with the sword and spoil their goods because of the lack of bread, the lack of food, and for great tribulation. People breaking into each other's houses, so-called best friends and good neighbors and family members breaking into each other's houses and taking whatever they have left because it's so chaotic and desolate out here, such a level of scarcity out here. And you're going to see people's true colors out here. This thin veneer of civilization that people like to pride themselves in is going to be taken out of the way. And again, it's going to be dog eat dog. Every man for himself out here. And the only people that are going to have any sort of protection over them are the elect of the nation of Israel. Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai is going to provide for us. Aparatazah, I'm of that number in that day. Hey, we're going to eat and drink, as it says in Isaiah chapter 65, while everybody else is going to starve and thirst and mourn and lament. We're going to be safe from this violence and all that, and ultimately see salvation, while everybody else, the wicked of our people in this country and you heathens, are going to go through it and then ultimately be wiped off the map when nuclear missiles hit this country and turn it into the biblical lake of fire from sea to shining sea, and then a desolate, uninhabitable wasteland afterwards. So that's it with this video. With this video, I hope you sincere Akim and Akwath were edified. Just keep strong. As we can clearly see, we're almost out of this final wicked captivity of the heathen nations, chiefly of the Edomites. And as always, I'm going to say Abad Babal, Kwam Yasharallah, and until next time, Shalom.